Welcome, Wargamers, to Bonesplitterz Week, where we will be investigating one of the craziest factions within the mortal realms. And when I say crazy, I don't mean like the Flesh Eater cohorts with their delusions and hallucinations. This is the mantic energy of the realms, the wildness of its existence lashing out like a beast at anything nearby. It's feral. And this faction really does embody the untamable spirit of the realms themselves, and so let's start talking about the Bonesplitterz. Now, the most core concept to understanding this faction is the idea of the Waaagh. I did a dedicated video to explaining all the different meanings, because it's a word with a lot of different definitions for what Waaagh means. I'll leave that in the description down below, but to give you a really quick recap, a Waaagh is a word that a orc war boss will scream right before going into battle, and this is, when I say orc, I mean any of them, so that's Greenskins, Ironjaws, and Bonesplitterz will all yell "Waaagh" as they charge into a fight. Also, it is the kind of name that humans have given campaigns for orcs and their warbands. So that means, like, so you say Gordrak is leading his army north to fight, an order bastion. We would call that Waaagh Gordrak. It's the term we give for that campaign, that army body, giant war clan, whatever you want to call it. And lastly, and by far the most pertinent to this discussion, is the idea of Waaagh as an energy source. Whenever orcs of any shape or size gather in large clumps, basically, or warbands or clans, and they start getting really excited about fighting, the Waaagh takes hold. This is like the air around them becomes electrified. There's just this mantic energy that builds. They get each other super hyped up for battle, and if you are a shaman or a wizard, you can actually use and channel that collective energy that the clan is bringing together and direct it at something. And so you can actually use your warband as a power source of arcane might. This is how the orc shamans are able to do things like the Foot of Gork, a giant recreation of Gork's foot coming out of the sky and stomping his enemies, or arc this like sickly green lightning at their foes. And the reason I say that the power of the Waaagh is central to this faction is that is fundamentally what makes a Bonesplitter. All across the realms, there are thousands of these tiny little orc tribes, all doing their little mini campaigns. Most of them are being kept in check by enemies that are far more experienced in battle or bigger than them. But it's just a little roving tribe of orcs that like to fight. They battle here, they battle there, they keep on moving. And generally what happens is they'll go into a fight, they get all pumped up and excited, the fight's over, whether they win or lose doesn't really matter. But some of those orcs, right, from all across the realms, get kind of broken. You see, generally as the fight is over and things settle down, orcs do kind of get calm again, and so that's when they start looking for their next fight to kind of get that same energy back. But some of them, things don't go quite well. They prep for battle like everyone else, the power of the Waaagh fills their mind, but when the battle is over, they don't come down off of that high. They get stuck in that frenzy. And this makes them a bit of an outcast within their little respective tribes, because the others don't know what to make of it, because these crazy orcs are now sitting there, they're muttering to themselves, they're seeing visions, they act reckless even by orc standards. They even take off their armor and use the bits and bones from their kills as weapons. And they just kind of generally act strange, right? They're not right in the head. And eventually these outcasts or defective orcs wander away from their own pack, which I will say is very odd for an orc. Usually they're very pack mentality creatures, so to wander away is a very interesting thing. But in their minds, they hear the drum beating on the wind and they are pulled away. There's just something, again, they're seeing visions that are beckoning them to come away. And the source of this, the thing that's pulling them, is the power and presence of a nearby Wurrgog prophet, the undisputed leader of the Bonesplitter clans, wielder of the mantic Waaagh energy that permeates these defective orcs. And it's here that those wayward boys hear the truth of their state and the nature of Gorkamorka. Gorkamorka, if you're not familiar, is the deity of nearly every destruction faction. They all see him very differently and kind of build their own mythos around him. To the Ironjaws, he is the ultimate warlord set on leveling all civilization. To the Moon Clan Grots, he is the snarling face of the Bad Moon. To the Beastclaw Raiders, he is the howling ice storm, nature's wrath made manifest. But to the Bonesplitterz, he is the great hunter, the apex predator that stalks the realms. As such, to experience and commune with their god Gorkamorka is to be the hunter of the realms, to imitate him. to prey upon the largest beasts around and to go from being hunted to the hunter. So these Wargog prophets will preach that the very spirit of Gorkamorka resides in the bones of these colossal beasts that live around the realms, killing them, eating their bodies, and fashioning totems and tools and weapons from their carcasses. These acts will invigorate the Bonesplitterz with power from Gorkamorka. So you could kind of liken it to being like a fire slayer, right? They see pieces of their god residing in pits of gold, so they fashion it into runes and put it in their skin. Bonesplitterz do very much likewise. They see Gorkamorka, his power, his wild essence infused in the beasts around the realms, and they go around and use them as totems, tools, and iconography. They mark their bodies with glyphs, bones, other accents, in order to kind of inject themselves with the power of their deity. And on that note, we can talk about what gives the Bonesplitterz their unique appearance. In the name of all things feral and primitive, they lose any armor that they have. Weapons are crafted themselves, often using the bones of fallen beasts. They cut into their skin with bone fragments, invigorating them to even greater acts of violence. And upon their skin are marked with tattoos, religious symbols that capture the spirits of the beasts that they've killed. At least that's according to them. When empowered in battle, these runes, like these tattoos they have all over their bodies, can protect a Bonesplitter as well as the toughest armor. It can shrug off immense amount of damage as they get powered up by the Waaagh. And so putting all of these things together, because these just seem like a bunch of lunatic orcs that kind of banded around a prophet. But when you put it all together, they just don't fit anywhere else. And they're trapped in this bloodlust and battle fever, constantly on the hunt for the biggest monsters in the realms. And since the ultimate goal of them is to commune and release the spirit of their god Gorkamorka, it almost takes on the aspect of a religious crusade, as if they were an army of zealots, but for Gorkamorka instead of something else. And that's an incredibly unique angle for a destruction army, because none of the other destruction armies are like on a crusade to go share their deity. And one thing that I've played down a little bit as we take this high level view is that these orcs are all completely insane. It's a whole mess, it's a sea of green, or a whole mess of them, and they're all like babbling to themselves. They're seeing prophetic visions. The Wargog prophet is acting as a shepherd and pointing them towards the biggest beast. When I say shepherd, because he's just kind of guiding the stream, this flood of orcs, rather than being their true leader in the sense that a typical war boss leads. They just aren't right in the head by orc standards. They're hyper-aggressive, skilled in combat, and swarm over enemies in alarming numbers. Now, one thing I want to be clear is that even though a lot of the stuff in their book and their rules, I focus on monsters and big beasts, and it's definitely a part of their, quote-unquote crusade, they will straight up kill anything that comes in their path. Again, they're trapped at the height of Waaagh fervor. It's like a loaded gun with an itchy trigger finger, so if they come upon a civilization of humans, they'll just swarm over just because they're in the mode to do so. So these orcs are bold, wild, and perpetually on the hunt, roaming all corners of the realms looking for these great beasts to get the spirit of Gorkamorka. And so why are these cool, right? What makes this faction cool? As we talk about it for the rest of this week, why do I like Bonesplitterz? Well, there's a few reasons. What I like is that what makes them different from other orcs, right? The focus on the mantic energy, the keyword being energy there, of the Waaagh. The idea that, you have the Wargog prophet who is definitely the core figure, and kind of, I guess, his closest equal would be the weird shaman from the Ironjaws, but they just feel very different, where, first of all, the shaman is an outcast who is weird, and he can channel the Waaagh energy within an Ironjaws army. It's not on the same level as the Wargog prophet being the spiritual leader, supervisor, the shepherd, and just like a huge focal point for even more energy. He's just on another level. And this is interesting because he represents an orc society where the leader is not the biggest and the toughest, and that is actually a very unique thing amongst their kind. There's a very definite uniqueness in having a religious leader crusade angle than there is just, I gotta be the biggest and the baddest and fight all the other boys off so I can be in charge. So there are some really cool, unique shades. I mean, if you're talking about the tabletop aspect of it, one of the things it's one of my first armies that I painted for AOS, and it's one of the most fun ones that I ever had. They're a blast to play on a tabletop. They're a little outdated right now, need a little tune-up, but that's quite alright. And they play as a really fun, weirdly resilient horde army, on the tabletop. And again, at all points of this, they're all just babbling, mad, insane, rushing headlong towards the enemy, and it's a lot of fun. So friends, thank you so much for watching this video. If you don't know what I'm doing here, if you're new to the channel, basically sometimes I take an entire week and just dedicate it to a single faction, exploring all of its lore, the units involved, everything like that. And that's exactly what we're doing this week with the Bonesplitterz. So stay tuned. Tomorrow I have a very fun video planned, and then we'll jump into the units. Thank you all so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's video. Happy wargaming.